for teachers who make things fun and exciting while you also learn from it. And I think Shankar sir definitely is added to that list for me. Um, okay, so now let's move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker did her Bachelor of Engineering in Computer Science from University of Pennsylvania and went on to complete her MBA from the Wharton School. She started her career at Goldman Sachs and then she worked as a product manager at EasyTap Mobile Solutions and Square. She also chaired the Wharton Indian Economic Forum. She was the founder and network leader at Lean in Bangalore and also a shaper at Global Shapers Community in Bangalore. She is currently the co founder and CEO of Basis, a one of its kind financial platform designed to simplify finances for the modern Indian women. She is none other than Hena Mehta. Thank you so much for joining us today. And this session, titled Financial Education and Its Importance in Making Investing Accessible Across India, will be moderated again by Khyati, a distinguished freelance journalist. Welcome back, Khyati. Over to you.
Thank you, Richa. Thanks for introducing me and Hina. Hina, a very warm welcome to Thrive. It's a pleasure to have you here. And, a woman to woman talk about women in education, financial education. So, as we see the budget document of India, we would reckon that 6.43 lakh crores are spent on education per se, but a very minuscule amount is, diverted towards financial literacy in the country. So, since you have been a part of Basis which interacts with many women across India, please tell us how the lack of financial awareness is impacting women.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me here. Very, very excited about our chat, Kathy. And yeah, jumping right into to your question, right? Lack of financial awareness amongst women affects us tremendously, right? So we can start by looking at the life of a woman, right? Just generally looking at stats. Women tend to live longer than men, right? There's what we call the gender pay gap, where we earn less for similar jobs that we do as men. And to top it up, it also costs more to be a woman, right? If you're looking at healthcare costs, personal care costs, the pink tax is something that's getting more popular as people are talking about it. So essentially, as women, we earn less, we need that money to last us longer, and we're paying more just to just to survive as women in this market. So money management, investing, growing wealth, protecting wealth, etc., is all the more important for women. Lack of financial awareness, at Basis, we often use this acronym of 4Ds, right? So these are these dire life situations, which the 4Ds are divorce, debt, as in loans, debt, death of a spouse, and disaster, right? Like these 4Ds tend to disproportionately impact women more so than they do with men, right? And a disaster is something we saw play out real time in the last couple of years. So yes, all the more reason women need to be more financially aware. Studies have shown that 9 out of 10 women at some point in our lives will have to manage our money on our own, right? So it's important, it's critical to start as early as possible and really take control, take charge of our money as women today.
Right. So, it's been said a lot that apart from pepper sprays and defense techniques, a little money of their own helps women, protect themselves way better. So,
Absolutely.
do you think there are a lot of these educational initiatives being conducted by both manufacturers, regulators, and the government through its Investor Education Fund? So, how have they panned out, and are they bringing about any transformation?
I think absolutely yes. It's incredible to see the focus on investor awareness initiatives, both by regulators as well as other bodies in the industry, right? Every AMC has an investor education budget that needs to get utilized. We see focus from bodies such as AMFI. The NSC is doing so much in terms of driving education. So I think we're moving in the right direction. There's still a lot more that can be done, of course. We are obviously living in the age where content distribution has never been easier, right? In a matter of seconds, you have massive reach and scale. And I think we're really at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what more can be done with various initiatives from various players in the ecosystem. And so it's a really exciting time to be part of this, and excited for what the future will bring.
So, Hina, talking about content, as you said, there's a lot of educational content, but financial documents and jargon, if you see, they are so intimidating. I mean, we are talking about not just interest rates, but complicated terms and clauses where you have to sign about 20 odd times before opening a demat account, and there are 30 odd signatures needed for a loan document. So, do you think these are really intimidating women in India?
I think, yes. I mean, it's intimidating for anyone, right? Financial jargon, documentation, understanding products out there in the market, how they work, etc., can be scary and daunting for anyone who's coming into it, as a newbie investor, for instance. But yes, absolutely. For women, what tends to happen is social conditioning tells us that we don't need to worry about it. And men also tend to talk more about these things, in a more social context, right? So women talk less about money, have this social conditioning from a very young age that, tells us that money is not something we need to worry about, right? In fact, I'm not sure if you saw a Paytm sort of brand campaign last year on Women's Day, where they've done this social experiment where they had men and women asking women same questions, right? You file your own income tax returns, you take investment decisions for your family, right? Understanding financial documents. And we just saw how in that social experiment, the gap between men and women was so massive. So absolutely, it is scary. There is a lack of confidence, lack of knowledge, lack of trust. That impacts women, again, more so than they do with men. But this problem isn't restricted by gender, of course.
Yeah, the patriarchal fabric of the society sort of makes it even more difficult for them.
Right,
But
absolutely, right. If there's men controlling what various decisions in our life, then that does, and money is again an enabler for almost everything we need. So definitely, patriarchy affects all of this. But on a more positive note, we see that changing, and so that's promising.
so, financial advisors, they often talk about, they insist on getting their partner together for the financial planning sessions. And there is, some bit of movement that we see in terms of more
Right.
women earning and bringing the paycheck back home. But
Yeah.
are these funds actually being invested?
So, on your point about financial advisor, financial planning, amongst families, we've actually heard stories where there's inherent bias, even in that, those settings where advisors again tend to speak to the men, right? Women may have different approaches to managing money. In a lot of cases, I mean, there are lots of studies done on how women make better investors than men, for instance, right? So there are these inherent biases that play out in some of those settings as well. But sorry, I missed the second part of the question, Khyati.
So, when they get the paycheck back home, are we
Right.
seeing any investments through these paychecks, or they're just being, stashed under the pillow?
So yeah, I think
Bank account?
historically, yeah, women have tended to stick to more familiar places to park money, which are fixed deposits and gold, right? In fact, Indian women are known to have about 11% of the world's gold is with Indian women. But in fact, there was an article in today's Economic Times itself, front page, right, which talks about how just in the last year or two, the number of women investors that are coming into the capital markets have increased, and I think that again is a very promising sign. As with a lot of a lot of these trends happening in the industry, we are just scratching the surface, but trends and some of the more recent stats are super promising, and so. again, paychecks are coming back home, may have been parked in, the lower risk, safer asset classes, or asset classes that women were generally more familiar with. But we are seeing a movement into asset classes like stocks, mutual funds, and now crypto, which is, another hot new asset class that is again getting very popular with some of the younger population as well.
Right, crypto, of course, and there are a lot of learnings there. I have heard that through basis, whatever women learn, they can share with fellow women investors who also get a customized plan. So, tell us more about this whole movement and how it has helped transform this page.
Yes, I can talk about this all day, right? So at Basis, our approach has been, so obviously the gaps we saw in the market were knowledge, trust, confidence gaps, right, amongst women. Women actually represent the single largest underserved market that there is within the financial ecosystem, and that's where we saw the opportunity, not only from an impact standpoint, but it's also just a massive business opportunity, right? And we adopted this community driven education as step one, right? So it's not just about educating these urban millennial and Gen Z women. It's also about having that social proof, right? When a single woman on our community hears about how another single woman or a recently separated woman handled her money, it gives her the confidence that she can do it, right? We have, just similar to that, we have a number of different very, very exciting stories that have come out from our community. And so just having that social community based adoption of financial services, education, highly contextual information as well, right? So information, there's no lack of it today, right? Anyone can Google what a stock is, but how does it tie in with your goals, right? Does it make sense for you to invest in it, right? What are the things you may need to look at based on your financial goals and objectives? And so we've adopted that approach from the beginning versus just diving straight into, let's say, the transactional layer, or just having education on our platform without any context, really, because there's plenty of that. But for whatever reason, this content, this education still hasn't been able to really target women in the way that it's supposed to. I'm sure and every year we see this in March, during Women's Day, International Women's History Month. Various platforms will start talking about, why women aren't investing, et cetera, and that conversation just dies, right, after that month. And separately too, a lot of companies, a lot of platforms see this problem as a marketing problem, right? Or we'll just market more to women, and that should, solve for these issues. But the problems and the gaps run much, much deeper than that, and that's what we're focused on at Basis with this community-driven education as step one. That obviously needs to lead to action, right? So we're building our platform, we're designing it so that women take action, make their first investment, ensure they get the right amount of health insurance they may need, or life insurance. Access to credit is another massive market where, again, the penetration amongst women customers increasing, but still minuscule, right, compared to what it may be amongst the other genders. So that's what we're excited about. That's the approach we took, and we've been very, very excited to see the traction we've had so far.
So, at this point, would you like to tell us about any particular anecdote or live example of any woman who saw that she had to step in, look at her finances, and then she learned about it? How did she bring about a change?
Yes, again, so many different anecdotes, and I'm trying to pick some of the really good high impact ones, right? So one of my favorite ones, in fact, one that had an impact on me specifically, was again about this young woman, a 25-year-old working in tech. She talked about how her father had a heart attack, and all of a sudden, and she's an only child, she had to figure out what a will meant and how that's structured, and what we really needed to do as part of wills. And she shared her entire experience, right? That was eye-opening for me. I haven't had that conversation in my family yet. So that's one example where, again, the community element, again, information at the right time in a very specific context really helps, right? We've had, I think the single women category is another, and it's growing, right? India currently has its largest number of single women ever in our history, which means, these women are looking for that control and autonomy over their money. And, we hear a lot from this segment where, let's say a newly separated woman may have had all her money parked in FDs, suddenly has to figure out how to grow her wealth and shares those experiences. We have women who are saving up for a master's degree, right? I was in that camp. I went to for my MBA a few years after post some work experience, and I didn't plan for that financial goal. I wish basis was there when when I was thinking about it, but that to me was a wake up call as well, right? So we see across the board how there are very specific financial objectives women have, very relatable life situations that women talk about. Off late, emergency funds, creating that has been a hot topic in our community, right? Again, we've had women share stories right from, hey, my laptop broke, thank God I had my emergency fund to get a new one, all the way to I had a health scare in my family, thank God that I had an emergency fund, so at least the financial stress part of that was taken away. And so these are kind of the ranges of conversations we've seen. And what I've loved most about the community and learning about how women view money, which does tend to differ from how men view wealth and growing their wealth, etc., is that women have more of this supporting their family sort of an approach, right? So even with a topic like health insurance, when we talk about it on basis, yes, we do urge all women to have their individual health policies, but there's always questions on how can I get my parents to have better coverage in terms of insurance? How can I get my in-laws to have it? So there is that inherent, like, how do I support my family, which is like when women are financially independent, people say everyone wins, and that is so true, and we've seen it play out on basis time and again.
True, being women in finance, who knows this better? That the family itself would sort of economically grow the moment we see more women stepping into it. And I think the
Absolutely.
planning mentality also, the whole bit of, okay, not the approach that we'll do it when we get to it. It's always being planned well in advance.
Yeah, and women do tend to have a better long-term perspective, right? Which also kind of feeds into why women make better investors, right? So it's not just like, oh, I'm in there to make a quick buck, chasing returns. Those sort of behavioral tendencies we tend to see less amongst women. So women tend to be long-term thinkers, want to know details, right? That's the other thing we've seen within our community. It's not about just blindly following the herd, right? Like, what does this mean? What does this mean for me specifically? Questions like, hey, if I invest in a mutual fund, what happens if the fund manager leaves, right? What happens to my money? And these are questions and discussions that we tend not to see in some of the other platforms and forums that exist. So it's been, yes, eye-opening to be building for women, and very, very excited for as we continue to build and scale.
But Hina, again, we discussed in this previous session also about Bharat and India having huge gaps. How would rural women react differently to financial education, especially with the language barrier? We have very little content, and even the financial documents that are in vernacular languages, and they're too complex. So,
Right.
guide us through this.
Yeah, so that's also a very interesting question, Kathy. I don't believe, or at least from what we've seen, there isn't that much of a difference. In fact, with suburban rural women, there may be more of a requirement for women to have an income, right? So the whole dual income in a house, the urgency of it, the importance of it is much more. And in fact, in the same article that I was referring to in front page of the ET today, was talking about how women from tier 2, tier 3 cities were coming into the investing fold as much as women in metros. So I don't actually believe language may be that much of a barrier. Platforms such as Groww, of course, are doing a phenomenal job with regional language content. Again, we're seeing a lot of that change. I do believe it's a lot of it that's tied into our social fabric. In fact, we say a lot of the urban population somehow tends to get left out because that's the segment of the market to what you were saying, right? Like, oh, when I need to do this, I'll do it, versus kind of having a continuous learning, continuously being on top of sort of money management and finances. So I don't believe that rural women, etc., are behind urban women, but scope to do a lot, across the board.
Thanks, Hina. That tells us that, we're all made with the same mitti, as they call, and we can very well grow from the home minister to the finance minister. But after these educational efforts, have you seen them take in more riskier bets? These days we're talking about money being made in penny stocks, IPOs, and crypto, of course, not to be left behind. So, are they opening up to these riskier bets?
Yes, short answer is yes. Again, the stereotype amongst about women is that women are very risk averse. The truth is that women are more risk aware, right? So women tend not to, like I was saying, blindly jump into something they don't fully understand. Crypto being, a great example, we see so much interest in that asset class, but like a lot of other things, women tend to get left out of that conversation, right? So that lack of confidence tends to lead to lack of action. But once the awareness is there, the education is there, women know what they're getting into. We see appetite for risk being, quite high. So I think that's how women view different asset classes. In fact, stocks are popular. Crypto is another one. Although, yes, I believe only about 15% of crypto investors in India today are women. Again, trending in the right direction, but the education information layer needs to be there. And then we'll see kind of a huge, leap, a huge rise in those numbers as well.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Hina. And I wanted to understand, since women are also earning less, they're earning about 19% less than men. And there is this whole phenomena of costs which are also on the heavy front. Health insurance costs would be higher. The diseases faced by women are very different. So, do you think, after gaining this confidence through the financial education movement, they are asking for the rightful amount in terms of earning?
So that 19% number, I believe that may be a global number. In India, I've heard it's as high as like 30 to 34%, right? So the gender pay gap is ridiculously wide. Absolutely, I think once that awareness is there, women are tending to ask for more, right? I think even companies are getting more conscious of some of these biases, whether it's in hiring, whether it's in appraisals and promotions, things like that. And so, like with everything, trending in the right direction, a lot of work to do, but we are looking at these gaps sort of narrowing over the next several years.
And how about the social circumstances under which they live? Financial dependency leads them to a lot of stay stifled in those abusive conditions. So are they breaking out of those clutches?
I don't have specific data around that, but just anecdotally, absolutely, right? Like we say a lot at Basis, if you don't control your money, you don't control your life. And it's really hard to be sort of truly independent if you're not financially independent, right? We're seeing a lot more women who want to even keep finances separate from their spouses, right? Women who are recently engaged, trying to understand how best it is to structure finances with a partner. And we're seeing more of that, like move towards that autonomy, independence, control, privacy, etc. Right? So I think, again, moving in that direction, lots to be done. I mean, it's still very, very early, but we expect this space to really blow up in the next 5 to 10 years. As again, women tend to stay more single or tend to want to be more independent in a partnership, in a marriage, and want to kind of have that control and autonomy over their wealth.
Pretty insightful. And at this juncture, I would also like Hina to, unfold a little bit about her own challenges in terms of managing finances.
Absolutely. So I'll be super candid here. I am Basis's customer. I think Basis started because of my own pain points and eye-opening experiences about money. So just very quickly, the story is that, like I mentioned, I was planning to do my MBA, and that whole project for me was like a multi-year project. I wanted to go to one of the world's top schools. Did everything like a very diligent person, essays and recommendation letters and GMAT and all of that, but didn't think how I was going to finance it, right? And for me, that was that eye-opening experience. This was my first large financial goal as an adult. I had a good 7-8 years of WorkX, and so income generating years where I could plan for it. And I did happen to get into, one of my dream colleges, but the money thing kind of just hit me out of nowhere, right? And so that's what sowed the seeds for Basis. I partnered with my good friend, financial expert Deepika, who's my co-founder, to really build Basis just based off of some of our own pain points. Deepika has been advising women, men, both over the course of her career as a financial advisor, planner, and has kind of seen firsthand some of the challenges women face. I'm in that bucket, and I'm improving day on day, and building Basis has been incredibly rewarding, incredibly eye-opening for me as well. And I'm glad that I did kind of discover this when I did, and it's really promising to see. In fact, the Gen Z, women who are in colleges now, who are now coming into the workforce, are already quite conscious of this, right? And so where we are sort of heavily focusing on making sure that happens. I think even in terms of asset classes that they're looking at, stocks and mutual funds are boring. Crypto is kind of the new hot thing. Obviously, crypto has its share of risk, etc. But so much of an interest starting very early, and an audience that is very different from what my experience was when I was in college or just entering the workforce.
That's amazing, Hina. It's so good to see a woman creating, a whole system, an ecosystem for them to thrive in the financial world. And of course, when we talk about equitable power in the society, financial education cannot be negated. So thanks for creating Basis and bridging that gap. It's wonderful
Thank you.
having you for the session, and we wish you all the best for the venture.
Thank you, Khyati, and thank you to the Groww team for inviting me as well.
Thank you so much. I think it was a very, very insightful session, and especially being a woman, I think we can all relate to it. Definitely will use, the platform that you have created, and I urge all women to use it, because I think the first step is taking the first step, and I think that's what Basis is doing. And so, thank you, kudos to you, and all the best. And without further ado,